Good morning and welcome. So excited to have Inside Hollywood back here. I'm going to hand it over to Freda to introduce you to our host. Freda, always good to see you.
You too, Jen. Glad to be here. For those of you who are keeping count, this is our 37th show. So thank you, Jen, and especially thank you, Hawk, for making this happen and for giving us your time. Today is going to be a fantastic show. Which Hawk will introduce you to our guest, but the fact that we have so much history on our campus and our guest is the head of this wonderful institution that has so much history. It's a beautiful blending of both of our worlds. So thank you, Hawk. Hawk?
There I am.
Okay, take it away.
Good morning, everybody, and hi to all the residents and everybody on Facebook. Thrilled to be back. And today, I have a real pleasure. I'm actually envious of Jacqueline Stewart for so many things. Number one, she's the president and director of the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. She's a MacArthur Foundation Fellow, basically for helping to preserve and present the history of Black cinema. She hosts TCM's Silent Sunday Nights. She's the author of several books, a former professor, film scholar, archivist, and she chaired the National Film Preservation Board Diversity Task Force. She's been a champion of teaching the history of overlooked Black filmmakers. And I could go on, but we wouldn't have any time for the interview. So besides all of those things, Jacqueline's one of the most positive, inspiring people I've ever come in contact with. So welcome, Jacqueline, and I'm so happy you're with us.
Hawk, thank you for those kind words. And really, thank you for the invitation to be in conversation with you today here. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited. You have achieved so much in your life, but I'd love to start at the beginning. Can you kind of fill us in on where you were born and raised in the South Side of Chicago, and tell us about your home life, your family?
Sure. Before I do that, though, can I thank you for something that you sent me? Can I do that? Because I have next to me.
Sure.
The biggest gift of popcorn, which is my favorite food, Hawk.
I know that. That's why I heard you were a popcorn fanatic. So I thought, you know what?
This will hold me for a minute.
Have some popcorn. There you go. You got it.
So kind of you. Thank you. Really thoughtful. And I will probably share some of these treats with the museum team. But that was just really, really.
Well, it was Halloween, trick or treat.
There we go. Exactly.
Treat with popcorn.
Including some rainbow popcorn in there. So thank you. Thanks for that. And so I've loved popcorn since I was little. Yes, I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. I am a product of the Chicago Public Schools from when I was very little through high school. My family, most folks are teachers, actually, a lot of educators in my family, educators and people in public service and politics. My mom was on the Chicago City Council. My grandfather served on the Chicago City Council. And so I spent most of my life sort of watching folks do work that was really in service to community, and in a household where reading and pretty spirited dialogue about culture and about politics was always just a regular feature of our lives. And, I don't have a real background in academic work, but I think all of that background was really helpful to set me up for success when I decided that I wanted to get a PhD. And even before that, when I went out to Stanford, is where I went as an undergrad, sight unseen, from the south side of Chicago to Stanford University, where I was exposed to a lot of really extraordinary people. And I started to think about studying film as a.
Well, was there somebody or something that got you interested in film and film history?
Yeah, my mother is significantly younger than her sisters. Her sisters were born in the 1920s, Hawk, and I was very close to my Aunt Constance, and I never wanted to go to bed as a kid. She also stayed up really late, and like many people watching this, we watched movies on TV all night long, and she would, unlike TCM, which is commercial free, there were commercial breaks, and we would run downstairs and get a snack, often popcorn. And those were also moments when we would have conversations about the movies. So I love showing films with no commercial breaks, but I will say that the commercials created these spaces for her to talk about what she loved about particular stars. She was actually named for Constance Bennett. Or she would talk about all of the famous romances, on and off screen romances. And she also talked a lot about the theaters where she saw a lot of these films when she was a child in the 30s and then as older in the 40s and 50s. So it was just her gift of storytelling that was layered into the experience of watching the films that just made them seem like they were inherently fascinating. And it really did put into my heart a love of cinema.
Were there specific films that she showed you, or specifically actors or actresses that were like her favorites that we'll talk in a minute about It's a Wonderful Life, which I've heard is your favorite. But before that, were there other things that your aunt liked and you fell in love with as well?
Yeah, she really loved Joan Crawford. She really loved, so Mildred Pierce is a film that we would get especially excited about when it came on. She was a big fan of Claudette Colbert. And so Imitation of Life, the first Imitation of Life, 1934, is a film that we'd also have really intense conversations about because it was one of the rare classic Hollywood films that had a significant role for Black actresses, Louise Beavers and Freddie Washington. So we talked a lot about how meaningful it was for her friends, to watch films that at least were trying sometimes to reflect the lives of African-American people. But for the most part, of course, classic Hollywood films have predominantly white casts, and when Black people show up, they're in minor roles or servant roles. But what was interesting, Hawk, is that even when you would just have somebody flash on screen for a moment, we would notice that. And part of the conversation was, it's lamentable that Hattie McDaniel didn't get to do more and so on. But what these actors would do in the small amount of time that they had sometimes to just be visible, right? Like to turn something into a bigger moment. It was very cool to be talking with someone who grew up in the age of segregation, where you had to find those small moments in order to find something that you could connect to in these films. I will say, too, that she really loved Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies, and I still adore those movies to this day. And on WLS, Channel 7 in Chicago, they would play Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movies every night, really late, between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And it always ended with Shall We Dance on New Year's Eve. And the costumes.
I have this image of you and your aunt dancing in front of the television.
Totally. It's totally true. Those films are just so,
great.
Inherently entertaining. Yeah.
Well, so you went to Stanford. Did you study film at Stanford, or only when you went back to the University of Chicago for your master's and PhD?
I was an English major at Stanford. And it's interesting because film studies still is struggling for credibility, I would say, in academia. So at Stanford, there wasn't like a film studies program per se. Film was, I took a class in film history that was in the communications department, but there wasn't much more. And then in the English department, I would always kind of find a way to work films into papers I wrote. Like you could write a paper for an English class that focused on an adaptation, for example, because literary adaptations are such an important part of film history. But when I was there in the late 80s, it's when Spike Lee was coming onto the scene with She's Gotta Have It and School Days. And I became really interested to write about films the way you would write about literature, even if they were not literary adaptations. So I kind of put together my own independent studies and found some really amenable faculty advisors. And it was also a moment when I got a fellowship from the Mellon Foundation that was really specifically for trying to recruit more students of color to become professors. I mean, it's a field that, many of us don't grow up thinking about that we can do or don't know what the path is. And that program involved setting you up with a faculty mentor. And I worked with an anthropologist, actually, named James Gibbs. And he was developing a course on Black films. And so I was in the library finding citations of all the books that have been written about Black films and helping him put together all these VHS tapes, right, of films that were in the library, in the corners of the library. So that was a really amazing exercise that still is meaningful to me because it showed me what exists and what doesn't. And that, you have to kind of find what's out there in order to discover all the things that you don't know.
Right. As I'm sure you've seen, or I'm sure you're aware of the new Sidney Poitier documentary, which was pretty spectacular.
Very nice.
But again, you were probably just growing up when Sidney was the first real, I guess, Black star who could actually carry a film.
That's right.
And so was your aunt still with you at that time? And did you guys discuss Sidney? And
Yeah, we did. And we'd watch his films too. Yeah, he was someone who was just understood to be a true hero. I mean, as you say, the first sort of bona fide Black movie star and the first one to have above the title status. Those were huge. Right. And as we know, and as Reggie Hudlin's documentary, which is so wonderful, thanks for that shout out. Everyone should see it.
Oh, phenomenal. Great.
He talks about this important quality of Sir Sidney Poitier, where he was so selective with regard to the roles that he would, participate in. And he was offered many things that he didn't do and probably gave up a lot of income that he could have had. But he recognized that what he did on screen had meaning far beyond himself. And that's the way that people in my family always talked about him, as this person who exemplified dignity and an understanding of what it means to be a symbol, a role model.
There are people in my life that I have met who have that dignity and that respect where, the joke is I'm not worthy. The truth is there are people who I've met who you really don't feel you're worthy because they are so respectful and they have such integrity. And I was fortunate enough, I was making a film in Durango, Mexico, at the time that Sidney and Harry Belafonte were making Buck and the Preacher, which is a big part of the documentary. Yeah. And we actually had a basketball game, our team against the Buck and the Preacher team. And so I got to spend quite a bit of time with Sidney at that time. And again, he was one of those people you were just in awe of him because of kind of his thoughtfulness, his integrity. It really blew me away. And I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him through my years, but there were instances that really just blew me away.
Wow. What a great experience.
I've heard you say this before, and I think that our audience would really love it since we're all in the film business. Yeah. Why do you think film is such an important art form that should be taken as seriously as the other art forms?
Film incorporates every other art form. I mean, really, it's interesting to think about why. Well, I mean, we know because film is so heavily tied to entertainment and to, kind of commercial considerations. That's been a big part of why, certainly in academia, there has been belated recognition of film as an art form, but there are always, visionaries who understood. And now film studies is at the core of humanities disciplines because, as I said, it incorporates every other art form, the literary, right? It incorporates music, performance. Even if we were to look beyond what's happening on screen in terms of its visual dimensions and all of the artistic and design work that goes into creating a film, films have tremendous cultural impact. I mean, they have global impact and they work on us not just intellectually, but also emotionally. And, I think many high school English teachers have relied on films to teach literature. I mean, film opens up to teach history. I
shape our culture.
Absolutely. The way people dress and walk and talk, the kind of ego ideals that films have projected to people, it just can't be underestimated. And when we visualize so many characters, again, from literature, like you can't, when you think about Atticus Finch, you see Gregory Peck. Like there's a way that film even like supersedes, sometimes in great ways, maybe sometimes in not great ways. People come to know Wagner through Warner Brothers cartoons. So it can be used as a really compelling entry point to the worlds and the histories of culture. And what we see at the museum all the time and what we strive for is to have such diversity in what we represent that everyone sees something and it hits them. It hits their heart because it's from a film that they love. I don't think that the phrase love of cinema is it's an exaggeration. I think it's something that really is true and profound.
Yeah, I love that you have such a robust screening program at the museum. And from what I understand, it's doing very well. It's very crowded, which I love because I am someone who loves the theatrical and can't believe that anybody would enjoy sitting by themselves in front of a television instead of watching Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein with 400 people laughing their tuchus off, or screaming at The Exorcist or It or, Nope or whatever.
Yep.
And it just, I'm hoping that something turns, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but there's a generation that doesn't understand going to the movies.
Right.
And I don't know how we do it or somebody does it. I'm too old to do this myself, but I sure wish there was some way to make, we started with around the campfire telling stories. And it's a communal experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm putting that out for you. How do you feel about that as opposed streaming, as opposed to the movies?
Right. No, I completely agree. I mean, it's, when I'm flying, I find myself watching the movies that other people are watching in other seats. It's just a fun thing to do. It's cool to me to see how storytelling happens without the sound. So I'm just kind of looking and, oh yeah, they're about to get together as a couple, right? Like, oh, this scary thing's going to happen. You can totally tell. And, but it's always amazing to me when people are watching like what are supposed to be epic films on tiny little screens. We know that's not what the filmmakers wanted. And you put it exactly right when you point to specific genres like comedies, like horror films. Part of the point, the effect, is to have that experience with other people. And it was a real struggle for me as a professor. I'm fortunate that I was teaching at the University of Chicago, where we have a real commitment to film projection. So we were screening prints, and our sort of class times were structured in a way where we'd have our lecture and sort of class meetings, but then we had separate times for the screenings. It was like a lab. That's how we always described it. Like, you have your lab for your science classes. Well, this is like your lab for the film class. And it's incredibly important for students of film to watch it projected and watch it in a collective space. And I always love having those moments, and this is something we can do at the museum, where then you can have dialogue and you can have Q&A with the people who made the films. Like, that's also an important part, I think, of helping people to feel connected, and especially younger people. The pandemic certainly didn't help with this. It was already happening.
Right.
And, people's TV screens at home getting bigger and bigger too, in some ways trying to replicate, but you can't fully, right, the theatrical experience. I think there's a place for both. I mean, I don't think any of us regret when, we got our VCRs and we could catch up on films, and you can't see everything on the big screen, but we certainly try to show a whole lot here at the museum. And I think once people have that experience, if they're not accustomed to it, they kind of get hooked. I mean, there's something about it that's really magical and immersive. And if you do it with the right kinds of films and you bring audiences together, it becomes something that people are going to be seeking more and more, I think, as we get more normalized in what the pandemic means for us.
Right. So I've spoken at a lot of film classes through the years, and they always ask me, how do you get in the business? And when you said that you took English, English classes, I say to everybody, learn how to tell a story. Because as a director, producer, writer, editor, cinematographer, if you know how to tell the story, that's baseline.
Yep.
And the fact that you've taught that and you've known that, I wonder, have you ever thought about leaving academia and leaving museum? And I mean, so many stories because you know so much. Have you ever thought about producing, directing, writing?
Wow.
Now I know you've, so go ahead. That's enough of it.
That's an amazing question, Hawk. When I have thought about it, so I'll share this. I did a thing when I was in college, the Community Film Workshop in Chicago, and we learned 16 millimeter film production. And I made two very, I won't say terrible, because my family was like conscripted into being in the films. But, at the time, what I thought was, if I'm going to study film history and talk about what filmmakers do, I should actually have that experience of just what is it like to shoot something? What's it like to make a decision about making an edit? I just thought that would be helpful. That's the argument I made to the Mellon Foundation to support my tuition for this thing. And we actually then started incorporating that at University of Chicago, not at my instigation, but thinking, as you're going to study history of film and talk about film theory, you should know something about the practice. So I did that, and people ask me all the time, my family, because they were stars of my films, like, are you going to go back to that? Are you going to do that again? When I think about it now, I do think about documentary work. I do. And there are so many platforms now to share those kinds of stories through documentary filmmaking. And as we know, documentary filmmaking can be really capacious, too, in terms of the styles that it can incorporate. There's so much of the research that I've done on early Black filmmakers. I hope some of this is actually feeding into work we do at the museum. We're going to be producing more and more videos here. We have a set of pieces that we're doing in relation to our regeneration exhibition, for example. So I'm working with the team here on those kinds of things. But, I have to say, now that you say that, and I have sort of, you mentioned my MacArthur Fellowship, I still need to figure out what my project is going to be for that. I should probably not just think about writing. I could think about filmmaking as a
all right, cool.
thing.
Cool.
So I may come back to you in my
All right.
thinking on that
So
one.
now in 2019, I don't know, somebody calls you and says, hey, I know you're teaching and I know you're over here. How would you like to come and be the artistic director of the museum, our new Academy Museum? Was that out of the blue? Was it a headhunter? And what
Sure.
give you pause, and why did you say yes?
Bill Kramer.
I mean, now you might say, why'd you say?
Oh no, I don't know. I have to say I surprised myself in saying yes to this, really, because it was not on my radar at all. I had been approached to be part of the advisory committee for the Regeneration exhibition. This was back in 2017, as Doris Berger, who was our lead curator here at the museum, was starting to formulate that exhibition. And so I came out with the rest of the advisory group committees and did a hard hat tour of the museum. And we had a meeting off-site. And so I kind of knew about the project. I knew how ambitious it was, but no, I didn't have any thoughts about participating more directly than that. And then Bill Kramer reached out to me and told me about this opportunity. And he laid out for me the vision for the museum. And it was so compelling. Talk about storytelling. Bill Kramer is a great storyteller because the way that he described the history of the project and the many, fits and starts and challenges that it had faced. But he was completely convincing in mapping that this is going to be opening soon. And when we do, we want to be impactful. Like, this is going to be a place that's going to be so meaningful in the landscape of Los Angeles, deeply connected to all of the disciplines of filmmaking. The commitment to equity and diversity and inclusion were, as he kept talking, more than just talk. Like, when he walked me through what the exhibitions were looking like, I could see that there was incredible thoughtfulness and range in these exhibitions, and depth, and the research sort of strength of all of these offerings, and that it would include programming and publishing and working through digital channels. I have to say, it was like one of those moments where I felt like all the preparation I had been doing across my personal life, my professional life, like, wow, maybe this really is like the next step. And it's one that will allow me to share my research and whatever skills I've developed as an administrator. I've been running centers at the University of Chicago, a lot of public facing work. It seemed like, let's see, let's take a chance and see what this will be like. And I have to say that it is such a blessing to be in an environment where we have a team that is so committed to sharing these stories of cinema, as we call our core exhibition, and laying the groundwork for an institution that will exist in perpetuity. It's incredible.
Did you make change when you got there and got that job? Did you make some changes from what had been there and what had been planned before? I mean, you know what? Before that question, I have one, because I know all the residents here at the home, and some of them on Facebook can't really get to the museum because of their age or their health. Is there some way that we might be able to help them kind of do a tour of the museum at times with some kind of, special password or something, so they can get a glimpse of the museum? Yeah.
Like a virtual tour. And, we had done some things like that early on before we opened. It was kind of like a super virtual tour.
Yeah, I remember.
Renderings. Yeah. But now we have the capacity, you're absolutely right, to do something that really takes people through spaces. And we've been talking about that with some of our temporary exhibitions, because the pandemic also continues to sort of slow the numbers of tourists who can come. So that's something that we really should look at more carefully.
Right. I'd love to.
Meaningful. Yeah.
I'm volunteering to help you because I think
great.
These the people who are watching today,
yes,
they love film, and I know every time I go, I get a gulp in my throat, even though I may have seen it before. Yeah, because it's what I've lived my life about as film, and I know they would love it. So if there's a way to move that forward.
No, let's definitely make that happen. I think that would be great. And I hope that folks know, too, that if they go to the museum's YouTube channel, we are regularly posting videos of our public programs. And we've had a range of speakers come through to introduce films, to be in dialogue, and we're adding content there all the time. So
great. I'm sure that Jen and the folks at the home will somehow get that YouTube channel to maybe even be able to run it at some times during programming at the home. That would be great.
That would be lovely.
That would be terrific. So now going back to changes you made from what was planned.
Sure. Well, the exhibitions, as you know, get planned years in advance. So when I came in, we were finalizing elements of the exhibitions that had been planned. finalizing montages. We have so many screens around the museum, finalizing language and our labels and that kind of thing. And a lot of my work revolved around ensuring that we had consistency and coherence in the ways that we were mapping out all of this information across the museum. And then it was really important to me to build out our digital team. So our website became more robust in terms of presenting our program listings. I was able to bring on a VP of digital content and strategy, Agnes Stober, who was at LACMA prior to coming here. And she's been working with our teams to really, I mentioned this before, amplify our video content. In many ways, yes, because I recognized early on, we did a bunch of virtual programs before the museum opened. A conversation with 4 women Oscar winners that I was able to moderate, which was incredible, with Sophia Loren and Whoopi Goldberg and Marlee Matlin and Buffy St. Marie. They were really successful. And so we knew that we always wanted to be able to provide digital content to create a sort of, a virtual experience. So that's something that was really important to me when I came on board.
Okay, so now you're doing that, and all of a sudden, Bill Kramer's got to come to you and say, hey, I'm leaving. I'm becoming the CEO of the whole academy. I want you to be president. Now, tell me about that conversation and your decision to say yes to that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was incredibly honored. I mean, and again, not something that I was expecting, and certainly not expecting on that time frame. But it was his support. It was the support of our board. It was the support of the governors. I mean, I was hearing from so many people that they felt that the leadership and the vision that I brought as Chief Artistic and Programming Officer would naturally evolve into leadership of the museum that would continue on the path that everyone feels very proud of. And I'm really glad that it's worked out in this way, because Bill has an intimate understanding of what the museum is and what the museum needs. And so we're totally in sync in terms of planning the next 5 to 10 years of what we want to accomplish. And so it's really, really cool to be thinking about how the Academy needs to grow and evolve its own understanding of its history and its brand. And the museum is central to that. We always want to be a place where we're celebrating filmmaking, where we're paying equal attention to all of the disciplines of filmmaking. And to go back to what you mentioned before, it's about how to make sure that future generations understand the importance of this medium. And it's about nurturing that next generation of film artists and film technicians as well. So the museum becomes this important catalyst for that inside of all the things that the Academy has been doing.
What are the most challenging aspects of the job? And then I'll ask you about what are the most rewarding. So
okay, all right. So you're going to follow.
I'm going to give you both sides so you can.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we are open 7 days a week. We have a team of about 350 people. It's a big operation. So I'd say the biggest challenges for me have to do with making sure that all the teams have what they need to do what are incredibly ambitious jobs. Like, the mandate is huge. We're a global institution. So the care and the time that goes into crafting brilliant exhibitions, like we're not trying to make exhibitions that are okay or just like some people will like. These have to be really impactful. So maintaining the quality of what we do, it's been really challenging to also really come to terms with what it means to be in the long game. So for so many years, the museum was like a glint in the Academy's eye and a set of financial conversations and all of that and all the publicity that goes into anything that the Academy does. And that push to open was huge, like opening something like that, like putting on a big show, finishing a big production, that's huge. But if you have to, operate at that level, like you're just making a movie, an epic, every day, 365, like there's no downtime that comes with that. So
would you say that you're doing more organizational work? I mean, you came in as the creative director, really.
Right. Yeah.
You're still have that job, but now you have to, now you've got to worry about all the business side of it.
Yeah. The business side is critical, and it's about creating sustainability and setting realistic expectations of what we can accomplish with the team that we have. So I've been really fortunate to have a team that understands that and wants actually to figure out how to work the smartest ways possible. What is it? Not just about working harder, but working smarter. That's what I think about in every area of the museum's work every day.
And most rewarding? Give me a moment where you felt like, wow, this feels good.
Seeing like a multi-generational family come in to see our regeneration exhibition, Black Family. We recently did a Mexican horror series, and Marty Priquero, who runs our community and impact department, shared that, again, a multi-generational family, Mexican family, drove from Oxnard to see a Mexican horror double feature. Wow. And so just recognizing that people who don't normally get invited into museum spaces feel welcome here and feel like there's something here that they connect to is incredibly rewarding.
Okay. This one's a little tougher. As you know, there was a huge backlash from many members of the industry because the founders of Hollywood really were not given a space at the museum. Can you talk about how you're rectifying that?
Sure. Yes. You know, in early research that we had been doing, or that the team was doing before I arrived, there had been thinking about how to narrate the history of film in the museum. And if you come, or if we do our virtual walkthrough for this audience, you'll see that we didn't organize the museum chronologically. Like, it doesn't start with the Lumiere brothers and then we go through the silent period. I don't mean to sound boring in my tone, but we didn't think, or the decision was made, that it would be much more impactful to tell the stories of cinema through different disciplines, that it was incredibly important for the Academy Museum to reflect all of the areas that are branches of the Academy and to let those kind of guide that core exhibition. But the team had done a tremendous amount of research on the founding of the Hollywood studios, because we work so closely with studio archives, and because the Academy has the spectacular Margaret Herrick Library. Those materials are at our disposal. So when we heard from folks that they felt that there was not sufficient attention being paid to the founders of the Hollywood studios, and more specifically, the stories of Jewish immigrants to the United States and the foundational work that those immigrants had done to create the industry that made the Academy possible and that made so many of the stories that we tell possible, we took that very seriously. And in fact, we recognized that that aspect of the story of filmmaking, coupled with our location in Los Angeles, meant that it really made sense to have an exhibition here that explained to people who are coming from all over the world, or maybe even some people here in Los Angeles, to understand, why did Hollywood end up here? Like, why did this location become the global capital of filmmaking? So we drew on research that had been done. We also reflected a lot on a conference, a symposium, and a film series that we had done just after opening called Vienna in Hollywood, which looked at the histories and the contributions of Viennese immigrants to the United States, and specifically work that they had done in crafting what we now know as classic Hollywood cinema, business and style. And we're opening an exhibition called Hollywoodland next fall. And it will be our museum's first permanent exhibition. And that's where people will get a sense of why the heads of the studios, the people who became the heads of the studios, what they wanted to accomplish culturally and economically, and the forms of discrimination they were facing on the East Coast. You know, I think many people recognize that California, Southern California, was an ideal destination for the film industry because of the sunshine. But it wasn't just the sunshine. It was also the need to get away from the anti-Semitic, business practices of Edison and his crew, who were really dominating the industry. So this is, we think, an immigrant story that is incredibly important in its own right. And also, I hope, will be the impetus for a lot of conversations that we're having as a society about immigrant experience, so many people will find points of recognition and identification with the stories of the founders of the studios.
Wow. Well, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I want a sneak peek soon.
All right. Well, we're about a year away from it, but we are hard at work. Trust me.
Okay. Well, I was fortunate enough to be at Adolf Zucker's 100th birthday. Many years ago. I have a picture of me and Mr. Zucker, and I got to spend some time actually speaking with him about where he started. So, at any rate, we'll talk about that another time.
Yes, we should. Yeah.
What is your dream for the future of the museum?
We keep talking about the digital. I definitely want to have this museum function in a way that is truly accessible to people, even if they can't get here. I also think a lot about our Spanish language offerings, actually. You know, moving to Los Angeles, the demographics are very different than they are in Chicago. And it's been really important for me to learn more about how it is that we serve our Latinx neighbors in Los Angeles. It's a priority for us at the museum, and it's a dream of mine to get to a place where we are meeting the language needs of what we hope will be a reflective audience in the museum that mirrors our community. That's incredibly important to me. And I guess I also really dream about getting to a point where Academy members really recognize that this is a home for them too, right? Like, this is a place where the public is coming that wants to learn more about the work that they do, and that becomes just sort of a regular kind of interaction, not just in the programs, because we invite filmmakers, of course, all the time in our programs. But imagine what it would be like to be in the galleries and you're next to someone, you're looking at a visual effects exhibition and there's a visual effects artist there, like that human to human connection. I really want to think about more ways that can happen in an organic way, in a really natural way.
That's really interesting, because there are a lot of production designers, cinematographers, editors, whatever, who aren't doing it anymore. They're in their 70s or their 80s, but they're sharp as a tack and would love to feel like they're important and there's things that they could do for the museum. And that's a really, really interesting way that might work someday.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, that would be great. So, teaching, writing, filmmaking, lecturing, hosting. Oh, let's go back to hosting. Now, had you already become the artistic director when TCM came to you, or was TCM first?
I was already on TCM. Yeah.
So, somebody at TCM comes to you and says, "We'd love you to be I don't know, something just happened here. I don't know why." Uh-oh. Here we go. Are you still there? Yeah, hopefully.
Still see you, still hear you.
Okay. Was there somebody who said, "Hey, we want you to be a host at TCM"? Is there an area that you more than others, or and how did you get to the silence? How did that all happen?
Yeah, it was cool. I co-curated a DVD box set for Kino called Pioneers of African American Cinema, 5-disc set, really spectacular. It's all of these treasures of early Black filmmaking. And as part of sort of the press tour for that, TCM reached out and wanted one of us to come on and just spend 2 nights. Ben would show the films and we'd have good dialogue about them. And so I was a guest. And when I went on, we just had a real rapport. The producers were really excited about it, asked me if I was interested in doing that kind of thing more regularly. And it kind of evolved from there. I was able to be a guest at the TCM Classic Film Festival a couple of times. And then they came to me and said, we have this show that's been on since TCM started called Silent Sunday Nights. It's never had a dedicated host. Would you be interested? And I'm like, sure. My dissertation was on the silent period. It's an area of filmmaking that's really exciting to me. I would love to do that. So it evolved from there. And then I got to play a role in selecting the films and getting to know the TCM team. And it's just been beautiful. It's been great to be able to join other hosts and to do hosting in other areas, whether that's like our Juneteenth celebration, or we did a really massive Women in Film series that Alicia and I co-hosted that ran for many weeks. The TCM hosts and the TCM team, we come together on a regular basis to talk about.
That's because just being president and the artistic, you don't have enough to do, right?
Well, it is time, no question, but it's all toward the same mission. And that's how, powerful all of this is to me, because at TCM, it became clear that we had to figure out ways to ensure that the legacies of the filmmakers that we're showcasing on TCM remain relevant. And it became clear that the issues that you see in these films that are products of their time, we have to give people tools to understand what they mean. If anybody saw the intro that I did for Gone with the Wind for HBO Max, the argument there is the argument I make at the museum, is the argument I make, in these TCM contexts, is that suppressing the films is not ever going to get us to a place where we understand the roots of the problems that we're still dealing with. So context is the key. And so it's been great to be part of the TCM team at a moment when we've been trying to think more actively and explicitly about how to ensure that these films continue to be shown and that they're part of larger cultural conversations, that they make people smarter, Hawk. It's not about just sort of hiding from the truth, but like digging into them in ways that make us smarter and better communicators, and hopefully by extension, just like better citizens, just better listeners.
Aren't those the arguments that are driving some of us crazy, because they're not allowing certain things in school, books and discussions that without them, how are we supposed to know? I had no idea about Juneteenth my whole life until, it came up the last few years.
Yeah.
We should have learned about that.
That's right. Yeah. But it's never too late.
No, I hope we can get back to allowing our young people a chance to know all sides of every issue.
Yes, agreed.
Truthfully.
Agreed.
At any rate, you've spoken about that you're such a big fan of It's a Wonderful Life. I heard it on something, and I wanted you to talk about it because I think it's a really good concept as to why you love that movie.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I mean, it's like so many of us, because it had fallen into the public domain, right? And it was on all the time. We have it pretty much memorized. And then even then, when it kind of whatever rights thing happened and control was gained again, it's a film we watch every New Year's Eve. My children now watch it, my mom, my sister. And, Frank Capra, one of my colleagues, Jim Chandler, wrote a book about Capra and sentimentality. And I love that book. And I love thinking about the ways that he really tried to connect our emotions with larger social questions. And I think that film does that. And Jimmy Stewart is just absolutely incredible in that film. His performance is so captivating. I cry at the end of that movie every single time. The richest man in town line just gets me every time. And then going back to something that I said before, Lillian Randolph is in that film. She plays the maid, Annie.
There you go. I remember this. Tell the story. It's great.
And she is, it's interesting that Capra gives that character more space than maid characters normally have. So
I'm talking about the slap.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
Where I'm going. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay. There's
this moment when, Harry Bailey's about to go to the high school dance, and they're dancing around at home and playing around. And she's going into the kitchen, and he kind of slaps her on the behind as she's going into you don't really see this. You see his arm move, and you know what happened. And it's, supposed to be this very playful moment, but it's also a problematic moment. My grandmother was domestic. That's the term that she used. And we know that for many Black women in those situations, you could be a part of the family, like all that definitely happened. But it could also be a site for like unwanted touching and things like that to happen. So Capra like captures that, and it's not a critique or anything, but it's there. And so there's just it's really fascinating to me that he incorporates a character who talks back, who she has a real personality, and there's a moment there where she has a history that connects to something real. That just gives that film, I think, a lot of nuance that, again, like most classic Hollywood films, simply don't have.
Right. Hang on one second. I don't know if you can see this,
Oh, wow.
but there's Frank Capra and me
Wow.
and Paul Mazursky and a feature executive named John Fiedler. But I got to again, I think I started with the original Ben-Hur. No, I was there, I think,
Oh, my
because
goodness.
I'm fortunate enough to have spent time with some of the greats. And again, meeting Frank Capra, like Sidney Poitier or
Yes.
Adolf Zucker, it was like, oh my God, I'm so
Legends.
grateful.
Yeah.
And any rate,
Yeah, that's incredible.
thank you for this. Jen Clymer, our director and head of Channel 22, always has a couple of questions at the end.
Okay.
Jacqueline, first, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I know that our residents and the people watching I'm really got a big kick out of this.
Oh.
And I so appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are just from all the different roles that you have. So thank you so much. And Jen, why don't you take it?
First, I wanted to share a story that something you'd said much earlier in the conversation about was it your grandmother who was named after Constance Bennett?
My aunt. Yeah, my aunt. Yeah.
So we had a resident here, Connie Sawyer, who was also, in a way, named after Constance Bennett. Her real name was Rosie, but when they started to audition stage names for her, they said, you know, what is like your favorite actress? And she was like, oh, Constance Bennett. They're like, you're a girl comedian. You can't be Constance, but you can be Connie. And she's like, well, don't give me like Smith or Jones. Give me something, you know, better, like Tom Sawyer. And that's how she became Connie Sawyer.
Wow. Wow, that's a great story.
I want to know if you're named Jacqueline after a certain first lady.
Oh, no. I have a relative named Jacqueline. So for her. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
All right. So the two questions that we ask everybody, and these are hard ones.
Okay, yes.
What's your favorite movie and what's your favorite television series?
Oh man, these are so hard. Okay. That favorite movie question gets me every time. It really does.
And Jacqueline, we do not accept answers like there are so many.
Okay, I'm trying not to
Has
say
to be
that, as
one.
you can see. I'm trying not to say that.
While you keep thinking, I will share one other thing that sparked while you were talking.
Yes.
You were talking about watching other people on the airplane and watching them watch movies.
Totally.
It's not just the silent films in terms of storytelling for motion pictures. It's
Right.
also people who have English as a second language.
Good
Like-
point.
My father-in-law loved Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it was one of the few films that my husband didn't have to translate for him. He just they all got to sit back and enjoy it without worrying about language barriers.
Wow. Amazing. That makes sense. That totally makes sense.
And I will tell you a story offline later, Jacqueline, about how Joan Bennett, because of Joan Bennett, Billy Wilder was able to come up with the idea for The Apartment. I'll tell you
Okay, that sounds like a
that's
rich
another
story.
time.
That's a good one. Well, we talked about It's a Wonderful Life. I won't say that, okay? But maybe I will say Now Voyager. Now that's one that I absolutely adore. Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
That was
That's a
one of
first
my-
timer, isn't it, Jen?
It's one of my aunt's
It
favorites.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first time that someone said that.
Betty Davis?
Yeah, great movie. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
TV show. I used to actually kind of run home to watch the show Homicide.
Ah,
And it kind of, I think, got erased by The Wire. It was a Baltimore-based show. Andre Brower in that show is just brilliant. And the characterizations really, really compelling. I absolutely adored that show. That's a show I actually miss. I miss that show being on television.
I just saw somewhere where Andre's got a new show. I did a movie with him called Primal Fear that he
Oh my
was
God.
great in.
Yes.
He was
yes,
great in that. But he's had a great career. He's a hell of an actor.
He really is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Paul Attanasio, who created that, has either sold a new series or is about to launch a new series.
With Andre?
Could be with Andre.
Yeah.
It could be.
Well, listen, I know that you are incredibly busy. We finished right on time at noon, so you can go to your next
That's right.
meeting. But thank you so much. You were great. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Hawk.
it.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
And we'll see you for the residents and our Facebook friends. We're going to have the great TV director Jim Burrows on in a few weeks. So can't wait to see you then. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Hawk. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. We've got Wandering the World Wide Web up next for you. We'll see you at 12:30 as well, live for Lisa's meditation. Bye, Hawk.